topic is quiet quitting. How many? When was the first time you heard of quiet quitting?
A couple weeks ago.
When this article was posted.
Okay, cool.
I had just seen it. About 5 days before.
Oh, really?
Is a different angle, but yeah. It was talking about
So I have heard about quiet quitting for a while because I'm one of these weird people that there are certain news channels that I follow and I consistently look at because I can't just watch TV news because it drives me nuts. And so there's just a couple of places where I go and quiet quitting has come up. Has been in their feeds now for a couple of months. And so I've kind of been...
Explain quiet quitting for the listeners.
From the NPR article, it's basically where you don't quit your job, but you make a decision of, I am not going to go above and beyond to do anything exceptional with the job, I guess, basically. Here's a couple of quotes from the article I had to pull out. And there are things I like about it. So I'll just say this up front. There are things that I like about this, but there are things I really don't like about it. So we'll unpack that. Here's one quote from the article. I recently learned about this term called quiet quitting, where you're not outright quitting your job, but you're quitting the idea of going above and beyond. Okay. And then it says you're still performing your duties, but you're no longer subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be done, has to be your life. The reality is it's not, and your worth as a person is not defined by your labor. So even within that paragraph, there's some good things, and there's some things kind of like nails on the chalkboard. Quiet quitting, in other words, is not really about quitting. It's more like a philosophy for doing the bare minimum at your job. So would you want to hire that person with that philosophy? Absolutely not. I would not share that as a part of your core values if you were interviewing for a job. Then this one's kind of funny. In Japan, there was a concept called
shokunin.
Shokunin. There you go. Yep. Which refers to the artisan who is deeply dedicated to their craft, always striving for perfection in what they make. Quiet quitting is like the opposite of that. And so it's oh man. So the question you have in your mind is, would you hire this person? Well, probably not. Now, I would say that every workplace has plenty of people who maybe this might be their secret motto, or maybe this is a part of their value of, I'm just going to do what I need to do for my job. But
I got news for you. If you're out there and you're one of those people that's quiet quitting and you think it's part of your secret motto, it's not a secret. Everyone around you can see it.
Yeah.
And the people you work for can see it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the good and the bad, okay? Let's start with the good. I think the bad can be a little bit obvious, but what's good about what you read in this article, what you saw in this article?
I know that we don't all agree at this table, but I actually don't mind the concept of this to a certain degree. I think really what this is, it's not new. We've just actually put a name to something like we always do. It's so weird. But a couple weeks ago on our podcast, we talked about how, our culture is kind of shifting away from a non-believer's viewpoint when it comes to cohabitation. Yeah. And so in this sense, I think that we're really quitting more of the culture than we are. I think that's what's positive about this. Yeah. So I hate the phrase hustle culture. I cannot, anyways, this is really difficult for me because I like to go the extra mile. I personally work hard, but I also have struggled setting boundaries. Yeah. And after I got married, we realized hey, your work is coming home with you a lot. And not that it doesn't need to, it can, but just constantly feeling like I need to be available. I'm a perfectionist, so I will push myself to very unhealthy limits because I don't have boundaries. And so this idea of I have to hustle if I want to have anything in this world is very annoying to me, and I don't like this boss babe movement either. Women are called to do so much more than just their job also, and I just think at the end of my life, I don't want to look back And I don't think I will look back. And even those other women who are caught up in this culture will look back and be like, I'm so glad I was a boss babe. I think what's going to happen is that they're going to say, I regret having spent so much time chasing something to never be satisfied at the end, that I missed my kids growing up. I missed my parents passing away. I missed all these things in the timeline of my life. And so that's where I think it's positive that we are labeling, like, I'm quitting this culture of hustling, but there is negative with that as well.
Yeah, I think you well stated the other side of it, and it's like there's this balance. It's like two sides of a coin and everything. So it's tough. So yeah, you're going to say something, David?
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting
I said
that
David that time.
He said David.
I find it interesting
soft
that it's the line is kind of drawn on what generation you grew up in, because for like you got your baby boomers and you got your, I guess you're is that Gen X? Is that what you want?
No, I'm not Gen X and I'm not millennial. I'm this funky like 10 or 12 years in between.
Yeah.
Because here's the way they define us. We were born into a world that didn't have technology the way modern technology is, but the technology came and we were still young enough that we could adapt to it.
Yeah.
And so we're in the middle.
You got Gen X, you got millennials,
Jones.
and then you got Zennials.
Is
So,
Zennial.
Gen Z. It seems like this is really popular in the younger Gen Z, and then for us in the millennials, it's like we kind of have a hybrid view of this because our parents grew up in that generation of you're working and you're working a lot and you're constantly working, and then but we kind of hybrid into the fact that we as younger folks see the experiences that we have outside of work more as our identity than our jobs. I'm trying to speak for a whole generation here, which is not necessarily true for everyone, but for me specifically, I find myself more on the opposite side than the pro for it, just because I understand and I get everything. Like I want to be the way that this article is saying of you're shutting off because you want to spend time with the people that you care about the most. But I personally have a hard time with that too. It's just because I have a hard time shutting off work. I'm constantly thinking about it. And, when I introduce myself, my first identity is what do I do? That's what is my job? And so that's if we're going to go into kind of more of a Christian outlook of this, that's definitely unhealthy. The fact that we are spending so much time working in and keeping our minds on work that we miss the fact that our identity is not in our jobs.
Yeah.
But that's just my millennial side of things.
That's good. You think about the different generations. So my parents are definitely boomer parents.
Yep.
They definitely are products that came out of World War II. And you think about their parents' generation that went through the Great Depression. I think that we're molded by our culture, and so you have a very poor culture. Can hardly pay the bills. They don't want that for their kids and everything. So I think you have a very hardworking culture coming out of that because they don't want that, and they want to push out of that. I think this generation's coming out of a season of great wealth, a lot of great things, but yet mom and dad weren't around as much, and so they saw the sacrifices and what that did to them. And so I don't think that either one's wrong. I'd really love what you had to say, Allie, in the fact that you don't want to do this to the detriment of your family, and we've probably all been guilty of that. And boundaries. My wife is good with boundaries, and she's good. Like whenever there's a decision to be made ministry-wise, I can get real excited about something. There's a ministry that we're praying about that we would love to add to this church. And I'm excited about it. And I'm patiently waiting for my wife, in my mind, to kind of catch up to speed to where I'm at. But the more we talk about it, I hear more of the wisdom. Maybe we don't do it this way. Maybe we need to do it this way so we don't overdo it and it crowds into our family life. So I think there's a balance. Can we be effective? Can we still desire excellence in what we do, but yet frame it within something that is fair for the family as well. So I commend both of them within that. So what was interesting about this is as we were deciding on these articles, I guess last week I was saying, I want to do this. Yesterday, again, two things happened yesterday. That testimony that we talked about at the last recording, and then this one, we got a recording. You guys, everyone had to do the cultural index, right? And so that's a part of the hiring process here at the church. Well, the guy who comes and does the training, he sent out an email, and it was exactly about quiet quitting. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. And
It's like we were preordained to
talk about it.
talk about it.
So we do this cultural index. We take it before during the hiring process, and it's based on how we as people approach work. So it's not exactly a personality profile, but it kind of is. It takes your personality, how you approach your work in your role. And I know that at least in our department for discipleship, Jim, like he does everything by this. And his quote is, "The CI don't lie," is what and what this is saying here within the article that he sent us is that he thinks that quiet quitting has a lot to do with people not fitting well with their job. Their personalities and their jobs don't lend well together. And he said, in fact, personality correlates so tightly with jobs that it may affect job choices more than skills.
Wow.
Which is interesting, right? And so it's not just good to see what you're good at, but also your personality type and maybe fitting within that. And he says that about 12% of those in the workforce, or 11%, fit their jobs really well with their personality. So looking at your skills is important. Looking at your personality and how you approach that skill is important too. So that was just really cool. So that might be part of it as well, you know. So interesting article. So you have any thoughts, James?
I do.
He has lots of thoughts.
I do.
Patiently waiting over there.
So, obviously I'm the one who brought this up, and I've been reading this stuff for a while now. And so I absolutely love what Allie's talking about. What you're talking about is work-life balance, right? And that's super critical. It's super important.
Yep.
And you're right. So many people struggle with that. And everybody always says, you hear at funerals, oh, nobody's going to die, and say, man, I wish I'd have spent more time at work. The challenge that I have with the quiet quitting movement is just like anything else that's happened, is that we can't just call it work-life balance and leave it at that. It becomes this extremism. And this is where the struggle for me comes into it, is that I'm all about work-life balance. Like one of the things I absolutely do love, not talking because it's, review season, but one of the things I do love about here is we have leadership that's very passionate about the Sabbath and passionate about us being able to have that time to rest and relax. And, yes, depending on who you are and where you serve, sometimes there's demands that reach into that. But for the most part, we try really hard to protect that. And so, and that's a little different, but the problem that I have with it is that it's the philosophy of doing the bare minimum at your job, right, and that's where this pendulum has swung too far, and there are too many people that are sitting at the workplace only going as far as only doing what they absolutely have to do to earn their paycheck and then go home for the day. And the problem is that's very detrimental to the work environment. And I recently had a conversation with someone who used to work for me that. They're in a position where they're considering some things in their life. And I just literally asked, I said, okay, time for the brass tacks talk. Why did you quit? And the reason they quit, one of the reasons they quit was because there were people on the team that he worked on that were essentially they were quiet quitters. They only did the bare minimum that they had to do for their job. And so with this person's nature of being the person that goes above and beyond, they didn't want to let balls drop, so they were constantly giving more, and they felt like they were surrounded by a team of people that were only doing what was minimum required, and it burned them out. They couldn't handle it. They began to have animosity and strive towards the people they worked with, kind of a thing. And I'm inserting that because it's an obvious statement, but the fact is when you have a group of people that are only doing what they have to do to get by, then that's not fair to the rest of the team who is going above and beyond. Now, I'm not talking about taking work home and working all throughout the weekend. I think that's too far. That's too far the other direction, right? Like that pendulum really needs to sit in the middle. And I think that's where my challenge with the whole quiet quitting thing comes in, is that if it was just about work-life balance and making sure people were happy and healthy, I would be all over it, because I totally believe in that. I'm not in favor of I'm just going to come in, do what I have to do, then sit and get into the scroll because my work's done and earn my paycheck and then go home. It's like, no, I mean, that for us, that's not even, that's against our staff covenant, and so that's where I think the challenge is like this
There's
whole
a middle
work-life balance
ground.
thing became a huge thing a few years ago. And then we had the pandemic where so many people were either working from home and they loved it. And then it's like, okay, the world's kind of returned to normal, but they kind of got used to just being at home and not having to do as much and not having to and so it's almost like there's this negative tint to it that came out of the pandemic, and we swung that pendulum just a little too far, in my opinion. And so,
Yeah,
and that's
I
what I'm
think
saying.
finding that happy balance
Yeah,
is
it's
so
all about the balance.
And for me, I think, and this goes with my personality, even though I'm driven, I'm not very detailed oriented. And so is there time in my day that could be more efficient? Absolutely. Like that's probably my biggest thing is going from one thing to another. And so finding ways for me to be efficient, that's what I want to do. I love, like at this job that I have here, I only have one main task, overseeing the adult discipleship. And when I was a church planter, I was everything. I was the secretary. I was, I set up the chairs. I was the first one there, the last one to leave. So it was hard. That's the hardest work I've ever done. And I can specialize here and focus on my task. And so it's still hard work, but I'm able to be laser focused on it. And I love that. And it's like I have a life now and I want to protect it. Like I want to have a day off. I want to be able to enjoy family. I want to be able to go mountain biking. But so it's only a few phrases in here. If quiet quitting really does mean doing the bare minimum, man, I just don't think I could do it. That wouldn't be inspiring. I got to have a job that grips me and that makes me want to work and something, that's important. And so I think that's just where it grates against my personality. But I think most people, when they say that they're quiet quitting, I'm hoping that they're not meaning that they want to do the bare minimum. I think kind of like what you're talking about, Allie, you're talking about, I want to protect my family. I want to protect my marriage. I want to make sure that my work is not robbing me of what God's really called me to be and to do, and that is to be a wife, maybe one day, Lord willing, a mom, all those other things, right? And so I think that's the good part that I see within this movement of family is important.
Yep.
And I think we've lacked that for so long.
I even think that there's like this weird middle ground, and this is so not my personality. I think personality is the biggest factor in this, but as frustrating as it would be to me, because I was always the kid who did the group project, but like if I have somebody who's dependable who comes in, I know that they're efficient the full time they're here.
Yeah.
I know they're not going to go the extra mile, but they're going to do the job that they've been assigned to do. I mean, is there anything truly immoral about that?
Unless it depends on the job. Some jobs require people to go the extra mile. If you're kind of the last one, it's like you're responsible for that area, then you got to expect sometimes you got to come in over the weekend. You're kind of overseeing,
it's what they call the penalty of leadership, right? Like that cliche.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if they're not in leadership.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that's the thing is that's what I really
would agree
struggle
with
with
you.
is like
Yep.
this concept of if it truly is bare minimum, that's totally different to
Right.
me. But if it's like I'm literally going to come in and do what I'm expected to do, paid to do, I will be efficient. You can depend on me.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give you any more than what I give you during work hours. And maybe it's not even to protect family. It's just that I think it could be seen as complacency, but maybe it's not even complacency. It's like, hey, I'm not interested in moving up the ladder. I'm content.
Yeah.
And so is there a burden with contentment when it comes
I
to
don't think
workforce?
so. My father-in-law, he's the godliest man I know. And when Ashley and I first got married, he was offered a promotion and he decided not to take it. And I came from a family where career is important, and I was really proud of what my dad did. And I was just floored. I was like, totally different values that he had. He loved to fish. He just enjoyed life. He enjoyed ministry. He enjoyed his church and his family. Great dad. And he turned it down. He goes, I just didn't want the stress. I like where I'm at, and I was like, wow, great admiration. At first I was shocked, and after a while I was like, wow, that's
And
cool.
Maybe this is too long of a discussion for a question like this, but I'm still going to ask it. Where does that line draw between job and ministry?
Yeah.
Because for us, we have a unique job because our job is our ministry. So that's the line I've had to find a lot, because it's like, since we work for a church, your goal is to expand the gospel. Like, that is your goal.
And it's a very people-oriented job.
And so
Yeah.
anytime that you are hindering that goal, that vision, then
Yeah.
that's the part
Yeah,
where
and
I find hard.
and my
time
answer
balance.
to you on that is, when it's affecting your family, when it's affecting your marriage, then it is negatively impacting other people. And you're not going to be as happy at your work,
Yeah.
and you're not going to be giving your best. And so I think that's where that balance and that conversation has to always happen with your spouse, and making sure you're on the same page. You know, there's some spouses, like when I watch Pastor Wes and Lisa, I'm always amazed at what they do. I think they do go above and beyond. I can't imagine them. He couldn't do his job 40 hours a week. I don't even think he can do his job 50 hours a week. But they are so in tune, and they're both called into this, and therefore it doesn't create that tension or that stress or anything. Right. And it's like, it's beautiful to see that partnership. But that's not all of us. And we have different boundaries in different roles and different seasons of life as well. Different seasons. Our kids are out of the house now, so we have more time. And so you guys are on the early end of your marriage, and so different set of requirements. So,
and my thing is, like, us for working for a church is totally different than a secular job, because what we're called to do, yes, not to detriment our family and things, but is it not biblical, but just this idea of ministry? Is it bad for us to apply this concept?
No, I don't think so.
Because, like, then to the point where you're not necessarily detrimenting your family. I'm talking about, like, during the work hour, you are only doing what is necessary.
Right. Yeah. Well, to me, yeah, maybe there's an element of that. That's the piece where I struggle with. It's like, I need to find out how to excel in what I do and be good at what I do in an allotment that's not going to rob my family. And, like, you hear of, I'm not going to name the name of missionaries of our history, where they are highlighted as icons of, but yet they totally neglected their family and it hurt their family. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, that doesn't honor God to me. That doesn't honor God to me. And we may hold this person up because of the great sacrifices, but I just think about what that did to their family, did just the opposite of. And so, and I've been around missionary kids long enough to know the sacrifices that a family makes.
Yeah.
And so it just breaks my heart. And I don't think God's honored with that. I'm not going to save the world. No pastor's going to be the solution. You know, God's big enough to raise up other people to where we're not the savior, in other words.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's got to be a balance in that.
Alan, there is a savior, and his name is Jesus.
Yeah. Yes,
Well,
he's
David,
the one. We are not it.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
to talk like what you're talking about, David, too, is it does go back to the legitimacy of work-life balance.
Yeah.
You know, and making sure you have that. And so if you're talking about applying that principle as of work-life balance to what we do in ministry, absolutely. If you're applying it to when I'm here, I'm only going to do the bare minimum, that I don't think is right. That doesn't represent and value Christ.
And the reason why I asked that question is an easy pushback from the other side is that most people will say you're working for Jesus, not your employer.
Right. And do everything as unto the Lord.
But that can be overdone too. Like, you're using that as an excuse to make someone work harder.
Oh yeah.
But
unless you
we still go
leave
back
your
to
father
God
and
rested.
mother.
Oh,
your
yeah.
family,
I'm not saying, like,
then you
I'm
can't
saying,
follow me. That would be a verse that would be used.
Yeah,
You know what
I'm
I mean?
fighting against the using almost like proof texting.
Yeah.
Of the people using it as a, like, guilt trip into making you do more work.
Yeah.
And so it's important for us not to
And
use
if you're
that
in
as
ministry and you have someone on your staff or a pastor telling you, you know what, you work as unto the Lord, so all 7 days a week you should be working.
Yeah,
You need to find a new
another
place
job.
to work.
Yeah, find a
Like,
new job.
you 100% need to find a new place to work, because that is unbiblical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is against it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like what you were talking about with Wes and Lisa and the CI. A lot of it does have to do with, are you cut out for the job you're doing?
Yeah.
Is this the job that is for you?
Yeah.
Like, is this the job that is, what you're there for? Like right now, my role is I'm a problem solver. I'm essentially like, I have a oddball title, because what do you call a title like that, right? But I am dropped in any situation where there's difficulty or trouble or something that needs to find a solution. And so that is literally my life.
The solution.
I am the solutionator. And so, it's like right now it's a particularly stressful time because there's a lot of things I'm fixing, right? And so and I can't seem to get one thing done and off my plate before another thing's added. But yet somehow or another, I'm still coming to work every day.
Right.
Well, if that was another person, and I don't have an example. I'm just saying, if it was someone else, the number of difficulties that I'm facing, the challenges I'm facing, and they're not like personal difficulties, they're literal things I need to fix. That might make them want to quit.
Right.
And that might make them want to be like, you know what, I'm done. Yeah. But because that's how I'm wired, it's not that for me, And so I think that goes back to, like you were saying with the CI, are you in a position that fits who you are and fits your personality and fits the way you're wired? And if you're not, that's where some of this tension comes in of, well, I only want to do what's the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, you need to find a job that you're invested in, that you're
and also,
passionate about.
And I think also, like in your case, I would like, my advice to you is like, it's okay for right now, but if this is like a 2-year thing or a 1-year thing, or if this is a long-term thing, it's not healthy. It would not be healthy for you to have to take your work home all the time. And you know what I mean? It's like, for seasons of time, we may feel that, but if it never wanes and there's not a slowdown, then you got to rethink your approach to your job, or you may have to go to your boss and help rethink or find another job.
I just got to work harder.
So
right?
there you go. Yeah. Figure it out.